the Kerbal King here, and welcome back to How Not to Kill Your Kerbals, Episode 3. Here we have a Munar satellite. It will act as a communications relay, so we have the relay dish and two smaller antennas, and a probe core, reaction wheel to turn it, batteries, solar panels, fuel tank, and the spark engine. And the payload fairing. An SRB third stage to get it to the moon. You don't really need that, but I thought it looked cool, so why not? A carrier stage and a swivel. So yeah, that's the satellite. So we are go for launch, so we should throttle up, turn on SAS, and 3, 2, 1, launch! We're just going to fly straight up until about 50 meters per second. And then pitch over to about 80 degrees, which you can see is about here on the nav ball. And then wait until we get to 150 meters per second, and then we're going to switch it to pointing just prograde. Alright, hitting this button. So now it should follow prograde and pitch over by itself. As we get up here, we can always pitch it back a little bit if it's pitching over too fast, so that we don't end up pointing into the ground, which is generally not a good idea in rocketry. We are coming up on first stage burnout, so we are going to just hit spacebar to stage after this burns out. So, separation. And we're going to keep burning until we hit 80-kilometer apoapsis, which you can see up here. And it just switched to orbit mode, so it pitched down more. Once you get out of the main part of the atmosphere, as you can see up here, you can separate the payload fairing. I turned mine to clamshell deploy mode so that it deployed its two solid pieces and turned up the ejection force, because sometimes they get a little bit stuck. So there we are, went a little bit past, but it doesn't matter. We can create a maneuver node to know when to burn to make orbit. So we go to add maneuver, and yeah, just try to get it to when the apoapsis point and periapsis point switch, so you can make sure that your periapsis and apoapsis are both above the atmosphere, which is generally a good idea. So you can see we have a 1 minute 5 second burn, so we're going to have to split that in half, so about 33 seconds is when we're going to burn. We can time warp using the period and slash keys. Period speeds up time, slash stops it, and comma slows down the warp. And I overshot this, but it shouldn't matter. We have a lot of time before we fall back into the atmosphere, so not a big deal. So here we are about to make orbit. You can throttle down to make a more precise burn, and then when you see, yeah, we can also switch it to going prograde, so that our apoapsis doesn't rise super high, but that's a pretty good orbit. So to get to the moon, you have to create a maneuver node at one side of your orbit to push your apoapsis out towards the other side of your orbit. You want to do this so that your apoapsis crosses the orbit of the moon. And then you can see, because we've set this moon as target, these two closest approach markers show up. So what you can do is then drag the timing around until you get an encounter. So right now, because there's no periapsis, it shows we're going to crash into the moon, but we don't want to do that, so we can move it back a little bit and right click on periapsis to keep the number up so we can get about a 200 kilometer orbit is what we're going to aim for the satellite. So 198, close enough, and you can see that's a 872 meter per second burn, and yeah, it'll take us 39 seconds, but that's not totally accurate because we're now on this upper stage. And you can see over here by looking at Kerbal Engineer, we have 791 meters per second, and it'll take 31 seconds to burn that. I thrust limited this to make it a lot more reasonable, and also reduced some of the fuel to get a number which is about 800. So you can just hit the maneuver button to point out the maneuver and warp up to the maneuver. We'll burn around 20 seconds beforehand, or the start the burn 20 seconds beforehand. So you can use the period key to slow down warp, or comma to slow down warp, period to accelerate warp, and slash stops warp from any speed. So yeah, when we're pointing prograde, you can hit spacebar, and that lights the solid engine. Now, it doesn't matter if my throttle was down, up, it doesn't matter. Just once you light it, you can't stop it, and it burns for that amount of, until the fuel's gone, so that amount of delta V. And we can finish the burn with the fuel in the satellite, which has a lot of fuel, which could get from low orbit to the moon all by itself, if I wanted to. So yeah, we can now just separate. And I locked this fuel for testing. But yeah, oh, we even overburnt. It has a really high thrust to weight ratio. But now we're crashing into the moon, which isn't good. So we can go retrograde, and because it has the big reaction wheel, it flips around extremely quickly, which is not at all realistic because in real life, reaction wheels are a lot less powerful than they are in game. So yeah, pretty good orbit. We can use period to accelerate super quickly, but before we actually head out to the moon, it would be helpful to deploy the solar panels and antennas. So I have them bound to the Action Group 1 key, so then it deploys the panels and extends those antennas. This antenna doesn't have to be extended. So if you look over here, you can see we can be recharging the battery. So yeah, we can just warp out to the moon. And you can go super quickly during long coasts. And once it changes dramatically, we'll know we're in the sphere of influence because it only calculates. Oh, and it slows it down to warp for us. It only calculates physics based on one body, unlike in real life, where all bodies in the universe have some effect on spacecraft. This only models it off of one body at a time, so sphere of influence is basically a sphere around the planet or moon. So we're in the Kerbin SOIs, it's only using Kerbin to calculate physics, but now it's only calculating the physics of the moon. So here what we can do is, what's interesting is, it shows that this is our current orbit, and then it turns to orange, and we end up going all the way back around. So the gravity slingshots us out, and then in some time, in 70 days later, we're going to come back by the moon if we really wanted to do that, but we don't. So we can create another maneuver at periapsis and just drag it out until we get a circular orbit. And point at maneuver node. But it won't point because we're in time warp. On time warp, you can't affect the craft because it's just on rails. So it's going to say it's an 8-second burn, so 4 seconds ahead of time is going to be what we need to do. And we can burn. And there you are in orbit. A lot of these maneuvers that we do don't exactly always need a maneuver node, but I'm just doing them to make it easier to show people, and beginners should probably definitely make maneuver nodes. But yeah, here we are in orbit. So it will act as a communications relay from Kerbin. As you can see, you have the green line to their tracking stations all around Kerbin, unless you have the no additional ground stations turned on in your difficulty settings. But basically now this shows that we are communicating from here to Kerbin, and up here we can have our ComNet stuff. So basically it says full probe control, signal strength 100% to Nye Island, which is one of the dish centers, and it says can transmit science data, but we're not going to have any because we're in sandbox mode. And then direct connection to Space Center, and this is our ComNet. We can either show path or vessel links. By clicking on it, change stuff. So now it shows us all the connections, so all these lines go to different ground stations that it can see. And then network would show all the other stuff, except there's no other probes that we have launched in the save. So there would be a lot more lines with that, and then none. But I don't know, I'm going to leave it on just first hop, which is the first connection, or path. Basically, those are the only difference. If, like, say I have a little probe situated over here where it can't see Kerbin, but it sees this, there'll be a line from there to here down to there. So, yeah. With that, I'm going to say thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and have a nice day.